Hi, Corinne. I read your response to my discussion post, and because I've already done my two required responses, and they both were under 2 minutes, I'm going to take a little bit longer, I guess, to respond to this one, because you brought up some good points, or you asked some good questions, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. You had said that learning objects do have a place in education today, and I do agree. And you had said, you'd asked me, do you think their place in education will hold steady, or are they just a placeholder until something better comes along? And whether it's a placeholder or not, a lot of times technologies, they just kind of evolve. So this current version that we see, you may consider that a placeholder. So the ultimate reality of what these learning objects, what they end up being, it may be so different from what we currently have that you may consider it something new. But I think that basically, yeah, the learning objects are going to be around and they have a purpose. Some of my, I guess, experiences with education and things like this kind of tell me that there's a lot of resistance in public schools because, I was working in Hawaii for 3 years, and I was a part of it was a Linux terminal server project. So basically we would take old hardware and we would use Linux terminal server software, and we would take the old hardware and turn them into dumb terminals, and we would install computer labs in schools. So basically, of the 3 years I was there, we never did anything in any public schools because they were very resistant to it. They have technology standards, they get monies and grants and things like that, and they were standoffish. So when you talk about donated hardware and installing a lab for them and using open source software, they basically were resistant. So the schools that accepted it, or allowed us to come in and set up a lab, were basically private Christian, those type of schools, some homeschool organizations, things like that. And ultimately, I'm pretty sure over half a dozen had been installed when I was there. But we never really broke through with the public schools. So with K-12, I think there's a lot of good reasons, I think, where if the technology is too open sourcey, I think there may be some resistance and it may take longer. But I think that in higher education, especially the for-profit online schools, I think that there is a big need for these type of learning objects and kind of some of the things we read about. So I think that's the most potential is in those arenas. Some of the things that I have noticed, though, is with the open source movement, I've been involved with it for a long time. There are so many things that are radically different than the learning objects, what we read about the learning objects movement. So when you're dealing with education, there is it's a community of practice, and there are certain things that I believe need to be followed, and those things are kind of counterintuitive whenever you want to try to apply open source methodologies. So for instance, using sources, building on knowledge, creating a body of knowledge, giving authors their due or their respect. I mean, the whole nature of education and quoting your sources and sticking to the intent of the original author, things like that. So a lot of times when you're talking about learning objects, I can understand why the original contributors or even the people who are using that source, there's a lot of hesitancy to change what someone else contributed, and that's kind of the nature of education, and it's a professional aspect to it, and I understand and I don't disagree with that approach, but that is very counter to what you'll find in the open source community. In the open source community, people will put something out there that's open, and they basically, when you put something out there that's open source, you're saying, here, use this, make it better, change it, modify it, give it back to me. It's kind of a cyclical process that will go round and round. And some of the biggest successful open source products that are out there, like Red Hat Linux or Apache or MySQL, PHP, there's a lot of products out there. I've watched documentaries where the original authors, like Linus Torvalds and Richard Stallman, they have commented that they've worked with people for 10, 15 years over the internet. They've never seen them face to face, never even seen a picture of them. That they've just worked online, virtually, with people in a professional setting for years and never met them. So don't know who they are, wouldn't know them from Adam. So it's just a very unique community, the open source community. So I see a lot of things that may be difficult for educators to really wrap their head around. If they really want to use the open source movement as a model, I think there might be some challenges. But I keep going back this week to The Cathedral and the Bazaar. It's a book by Eric Raymond. And there's a section in the book where he talks about 6 strategies that they came up with that they use to kind of change the open source movement. And I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that could be applied to the learning objects movement. So I think if they took these 6 things and used them, I think that it could create a lot of solidarity, and it could kind of change the whole momentum of the open source or the learning objects movement. So Netscape actually used a lot of these things that are in Eric's book. So the company Netscape had made a decision to go open source based on this book. So there's a lot of merit to it. So I think the open source, I think the learning objects community should be willing to look at something like this and take it seriously. So some of the steps, Eric Raymond, they put it together. He said, one of the things they wanted to do was forget bottom up and work on the top down. So a lot of times with the learning objects movement, I think a lot of the people that they're focusing on are educators. They're trying to approach educators, teachers, instructors, and say, look what we're producing out here. Can't you use this in your classroom? Would be nice. And they're kind of taking that approach that's kind of the bottom up. So if you applied that to a school, what they would say is focus on politicians, focus on superintendents, focus on people at the top of the education circles, instead of going directly to teachers and trying to evangelize that way. So that might be something that might help the learning objects movement. There's quite a few other things in here. They talk about educating the hackers in guerrilla marketing tactics. So it's another thing. If you apply that to the learning objects movement, you would be educating the contributors, the teachers, in marketing tactics. So you want them to talk the right talk, and you want everybody to have kind of this vision that you perpetrate, something that it's kind of a theme. It's your whole vision, and you want everybody to be on the same page. So that comes down to terminology and things you use to describe what you're doing with the learning objects. The other thing, number 6, was really important. They came up with an open source certificate marker, something that there was multiple attributes that basically, if you want to label your effort open source, you'll have to follow these certification markers to be a part of the community. So that can be applied to the learning objects movement. I think those are some of the things I think that have to happen if you want to see the same type of momentum, same type of success with the learning objects. So anyway, again, I showed you the picture before, but Cathedral and the Bazaar, it's a good book. A lot of relevant things that Eric talks about, things that we're discussing in this week. So thanks again for your reply, and I look forward to interacting with you in the future. Bye.